Hi, this is Walter from Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing, and this is my Montana Guide Flies video for June 12th, 2025. What I'm doing here is a pattern I primarily fish in lakes, although it originated as a Colorado tailwater mayfly pattern. I use it, I think, as a chironomid. A pupa is what they take this as in area lakes. And this is my top lake fly in the Yellowstone region. And that goes for every sort of lake, ranging from big prairie reservoirs out here near Livingston on up to Hebgen Lake, big lakes, and maybe not Yellowstone Lake, but I don't fish Yellowstone Lake much anyway, but on up to the lakes in Yellowstone Park, the ones with grayling, the ones with cutthroats, like really, really good pattern on Trout Lake for those big cutthroats in Trout Lake. Fish them on private ranch lakes, and that's actually why I'm tying it right now, because had some guys fishing these on a private ranch on June 2nd. I've got another trip coming up on the private lakes, and those guys on June 2nd caught a whole bunch of fish fishing these things dry dropper right up tight to the weeds. It's actually sight fishing for fish, and that was pretty exciting fishing, and trout up to 21 inches. And these guys were bass guys, and you can do the math here. We busted off a whole bunch of them, but like I said, it's a good tailwater fly, particularly in the other color variation I fish a lot, which is called the PMD version, which is kind of a copper, orange, gold blend of this body material. This olive one, is better in lakes in my experience, but your mileage may vary. This material comes in a bunch of different colors, and it's worth experimenting because you can get a really nice, cool, variegated sort of effect with the multi-tone blends of this angel hair. And I've tried them in 20 colors, and I still fish them in 4 or 5. So hope you enjoy it. It's a good budget fly too, because it's only got 2 materials besides the bead and the wire. Okay, so my hook in the vise here is a size 18 1XL nymph hook, and I've got a 5/64 inch brass copper bead on here. On a lake, I would never go with a tungsten bead. On a tailwater, I might go with a tungsten bead, and this thing would actually kind of stand in for a perdigon in some ways. Although it's kind of hard to make this into a jig, just because of the way the bead's tied in. And my thread on this one's going to be 8/0 olive brown. And you want to match whatever body color you've opted to go with. This material, the body material on this fly, is angel hair, and it's available in a million different color blends. And so you can match, or I guess you could deliberately contrast that material. But olive done on the olive done one. So this is not a bead head fly, it's a bead thorax fly. And so I'm going to push that bead back slightly from the eye and then make one X wrap there to kind of lock that in place, and then make a bunch more. And then what I like to do here is, well, number one, I just position that bead again. And that's not going to be locked in until I glue it, but the more X wraps you make, the better. But what I like to do is kind of try to cover up a lot of the upper portion of that bead with the thread, and the thread actually then becomes part of my wing case. I tie this fly exceptionally sparse. In fact, that's why I'm doing this video. Most people who tie this tie it far, far too fat. And so with a very sparse body material, I need a little bit more bulk in my wing case. And so you can see there that thread kind of creates, essentially an under wing case. All right, so now that I'm right behind the bead again, I'm going to grab my body material, which is angel hair in the olive brown color blend. And what I'm going to do here, this is about 30 times too much, but I've clipped off this pretty good amount. And what I like to do is, I pull off all the really short stuff and just make a pile of that, and then I'll throw that into a doubling blend at some point, because this stuff you chop it up and it makes really good flash in a doubling blend. In fact, it's probably the same stuff that they make ice dub out of, to be honest with you. But what I like to do is come here, and I find, you can kind of see there where it's starting to get a little ragged. I kind of come in there, and then I'm going to strip out that bunch. And that's still, honestly, probably a little too much, but that's certainly a lot more in the ballpark. I'm going to put that other bunch away, and then I'm going to come here, and I think I am going to pull out just a couple more. This is still a little too many, but I'm going to pull out a couple of those green ones, because there's more green in this bundle than there is than there is brown, and I want the brown in there too. I want them roughly equal, probably a little more green than brown, but I want the brown to be noticeable as well. But when I get a bundle about like that, that's about right for this 18. And you see that's only, 8 or 10 fibers, something like that. That's all you want. If you tied in twice that amount, you're going to make a fly that's way too fat. All right, so then I come back here, and then I like to measure. In fact, there's one more coming out. I like to measure kind of where it really starts to get raggedy here, and then that's about where I tie that in to be my tail. And I'll make, 5 or 6 turns, maybe a third of the way down, halfway down the hook shank, and I'm going to go right back up again. And that's all the body taper I create on this fly is that one layer of thread, halfway back to tie in the tail and then back up to the bead. I'm going to trim that, and I used to get all worked up about making it nice and uneven, like tapered, but the fish don't care. Okay, now I'm going to grab the remaining portion of that bundle and then pull it on my side of the hook and then wrap down the hook shank. And this is a simple fly. It's only a 2 material fly. Once you got the thread, the bead, and the hook, taken care of. But you really can screw it up by making it too fat, by making too many thread wraps, by making too many layers. And so I'm really concentrating on my thread discipline here and really going into detail about, what I'm doing there in terms of the thread discipline. And then my rib on this fly is going to be extra fine copper wire. And I will sometimes mix and match, go gold wire, copper bead, less often gold bead and copper wire. Or I'll just go straight gold bead and gold wire on this particular color variant. And then, of course, if you tie a black one, you could use red wire, and that makes a nice bloodworm, etc. Anyway, now that I'm back up to the bead, I'm going to go ahead and super glue everything in place here, and that's going to make the fly much more durable. And being sure to get a lot onto your thread wraps holding that bead in place, because that's going to lock everything up in place there with the bead. And then I'm going to grab that bundle of fibers, and I'm going to wrap that, and I'm actually trying to get those fibers. You can see how that's kind of flattened out. I don't want to twist that at all. I just want kind of paint that up the hook shank. And again, that's going to help make the fly slender. I'm going to tie that off with about 2 wraps, and then I'm going to leave it. I don't trim that because I'm going to use that for my wing case as well. I'm going to grab my wire, and taking care not to hit the camera, I'm going to make 4 or 5 wraps is usually sufficient for my rib on this fly. And really, if you had another couple strands of that brown, or if you actually wanted to use an off-color thread or something like that as your rib, you could probably leave the wire off. That's reinforcing the fly to a degree and then just creating a little bit of contrast. That's all that rib is doing on this fly. All right, and then I'm just going to break that wire. And I took a couple turns as I was tying off the wire. I also bent my my bundle material backwards, and so that's set up now to be in proper orientation to be a wing case. And then to increase durability, what I like to do here is take a couple whip finishes right behind that bead, do my 145-degree wrap in front, and then I'll do about 4 in front because I've got more thread wraps behind the bead. And what that's doing is kind of creating, well, number one, it's, that if the thread breaks going over the bead, it won't make the fly unravel. But number 2, that continued to kind of create the thorax and wing case of that fly. So the thread and the bead basically create the thorax. All right, so next step, I'm going to grab that material, and again, I'm going to kind of try to flatten that over the top of the bead to take up a fair amount of the space over the top of the bead. I'm going to take 2 turns here right at the front, and then I'm going to divide that bundle more or less evenly. And then 2 turns here, 2 turns here, and then the last step is just a 3-turn whip finish. Maybe 4 turns. And again, I'm being very careful on my number of thread wraps there because it is such a small fly and I do not want to create bulk. This is a, sort of a tailwater tiny fly, and I think it definitely has some crossover even on a stream to a midge, and so you want that nice slender body. But there you have it. Last step here is just to glue or head cement that tie-off point. If a little of that gets back into the wing case, no problem. Obviously, you want to keep it off the eye. But there you have it. That is an olive brown BLM nymph. Very, very effective, small mayfly or lake midge. I think, in a bigger size especially, they could even take this as a calabatus or even like a baby damselfly or something like that. But that, believe it or not, is the fly that I caught my biggest ever fish in Yellowstone Park on. I got a 6-pound rainbow on one of these on Trout Lake on my birthday, actually, in 2009. How the years go by. But good budget fly, too, because it's only got a couple materials and everything on it's pretty cheap. And you get, 1 pack of angel hair, which is usually used for streamers. You can get a whole bunch of these out of. And like I said, I keep saying great lake fly, but I would also try these on tailwaters because the fish see a lot of small, slender, bright mayflies on tailwaters. What they don't see is this pattern. I used to say that this is the fly that the lightning bug beat, if that makes sense, because this came out about the same time as the lightning bug, and you can buy a lightning bug just about anywhere, and you can't buy these anywhere. But anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, if you like this pattern, catch some fish on it, I'd appreciate it if you click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the pattern description below. And if you're looking for guided trips, you're kind of late for June and July this year. I've only got a handful of days left. Looking much better in August. Unfortunately, our August water conditions are going to be kind of suspect, given how hot it's been. We're losing our snow at a very rapid clip. But I've still got about 7 or 8 days available in September, and then a whole bunch in October. And you can contact me for those trips, or just ask me questions, etc. at flyfishmontana.biz. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.